started just a few minutes early, but not terribly early. But we wanted to jump on here and start talking about a lot of things happening here in South Carolina. And I wish I could say any of them. John and I are going to let you know that it's anything but good. So I'm Shannon Grady, and my co-host here,
John Cummings, good morning.
and we're going to be talking to you today about several things. Initially, we're going to start off talking about constitutional carry, but John had the opportunity to jump in on a war room. I'm just going to let John talk a little bit about what he heard and who was talking about our illustrious state. And again, I wish I could say it was a positive story, but once again, South Carolina makes national news and not in a good way.
Yeah, just to set the table here, this is about net carbon zero emissions, and that seems to be the goal amongst the green crowd. And the table that was set by Dave Walsh, who was a guest on Steve Bannon's show, he's a frequent guest on Real America's Voice. Dave Walsh was the head of Mitsubishi Power Systems for many years, and he's one of the foremost experts in the country on energy, not like our Secretary of Energy, who doesn't have a clue as to
That's
what's
nothing.
going on when it comes to energy. So to set the table, there are 13 countries in the world that have signed on to this whole decarbonization plan. It's the 9 Western European countries, and then New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United States. The other 170 countries have not signed on to this. They haven't signed on to this. So you're talking about 6.2 billion people in the world have not signed on to this. So you're talking about, over 80% of the world's population wants to have nothing to do with this because they see that it's, I'll be nice, it's a red herring.
Yeah.
It's undoable. It's complete fantasy. So countries that always pay lip service to this, Japan, they're in on the conferences and everything. Well, Japan, in the
Mhm.
last 5 years, they've opened 13 new coal plants. Now, part of that was because they had to replace the energy that was lost in Fukushima when they had
Right.
the earthquake. Right. So they built 13 new coal plants, and they get 10% of their oil and natural gas from Russia,
Mhm.
which,
Russia.
I,
Dun,
I
dun,
mean, if you think
dun.
about it, for them it's a good deal because it's much
Yeah.
closer for them, and they can get it much more cheaply than they can from
Right.
us, simply because it's a regional issue. India, which is the world's most popular country now, they have more people in India than there are in China now. India, 80% of their energy comes from coal, and it's climbing. And they just tripled down on their oil deal with the Russians. So they're not moving towards net carbon zero emissions, period. So what does South Carolina do? South Carolina, one of the reasons that we attract so many businesses here is not because of blank checks, although that certainly seems to help. A lot of the businesses that have come here from Europe are German based. And the reason that they've come here, car companies, chemical companies, et cetera, the reason that they've come here is because energy is about 4.5 times cheaper here
Mhm.
than it is in Germany. And actually, South Carolina is down in the bottom, I believe it's the bottom 10% of energy prices in this country, which, good for us. I mean, that
Right.
attracts businesses, and that's a good thing. The legislature, our Republican legislature, has basically mandated that all companies, including the energy companies, especially the energy companies, come in with net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
That's
Right.
impossible.
Right. And it seems, it's saying, oh, 2050 is a long way. No, it's not. It's a generation. That's all it is. It's
Mm.
one generation's worth of people. So they mandated that. And they also mandated that by 2032, this is the state doing this, by 2032, that's only 9 years from now, that two major coal plants here in South Carolina, Wina and Cross, which provide 61% of Santee Cooper's energy. And Santee Cooper's taking a big hit in this. And that's who they focused on in the interview with Dave Walsh. Santee Cooper, that's 61% of Santee Cooper's energy. They would have to be net carbon zero, and they have to be those coal plants would be eliminated 9 years from now.
And replaced with what?
Well, they can replace them with solar and wind and natural gas, but they can only replace 17% of the 61% that those two plants currently provide. And this all coming from Dave Walsh. It's not like I'm pulling these,
Well,
out of
hold
the
on, hold
air.
on. Let me make sure I understand this. So we're going to lose 61%, and they're only allowed. What happens to the rest of
Well,
the energy? You just don't
they're
need it
only
anymore?
capable. They're only capable of doing that. But then they'll have to buy energy from bigger providers like Dominion or whoever else. They have to buy it from bigger energy companies. So that's a major problem. And the cost of
It's going to be
this
astronomical.
$15 billion to Santee Cooper, $15 billion. And that means by 2050, for people that are about 250,000 people that get their energy directly from Santee Cooper, the rates in South Carolina will go up a little over 2.5 times what they are now. So I just told you that major corporations come here because of cheap energy, and our legislature has basically set it up so that the rates of energy in this state will go up by more than 2.5 times in the next 27 years.
So I just want to let me just
I know
recap
it's a
this.
lot to swallow. Yeah,
So,
it really is.
So you're saying that the South Carolina State Legislature, at a beginning deadline, they're gonna strip away 61% of the energy that Santee Cooper currently produces via coal,
Two coal
and
plants, right? Two in
coal
particular,
plants,
right?
and they're only going to basically be capable of replacing 17% of that with the allowed forms of energy, such as wind and solar. Well, obviously,
Right.
in order for solar to work, you have to have a lot of open space with sun, which anybody who's paid attention around here sees that the coast of South Carolina is filling up with people. So that's not a thing. And although you can put, you run into the same issue, and I know that we've seen already, right. We've seen already that there are problems with putting windmills even off the coast into the ocean. And Jeanette Sprout just commented that this is just another layer of difficulty for industry. So the possibilities for companies coming here are being reduced, which state legislatures are Republican supermajority working hard for whoever, we don't know who it is because it ain't us.
Right. And like I said, if you're going to try to replace 61% of the energy that's put forward by these coal plants, you have to realize that wind and solar, they're not continuous. They're not
Right.
continuous. In fact, they don't work most of the time. Solar on its best day works about 8 hours, which is about a third of the
Right.
time. And
Right.
offshore, which is the ideal place for windmills, not ideal for the environment, which all the environmentalists have seemed to have forgotten about. The
Right.
wind turbines offshore only work 42% of the time, and that's at their highest capacity, 42%. So you're getting rid of your continuous base load, you're getting rid of it, and you're closing coal plants, and the prices are just going to be astronomical. When you combine those two facts, it'll probably cost about 8 to 8.5 times more to generate the electricity by 2050 overall in this state than it would before. It's insanity.
It is insanity, and I just can't wrap my mind around the fact that we have an alleged Republican majority that has gotten behind this. Um, yeah, and I agree with again. What Jeanette says, hey, we're gonna suffer through minimal use possibilities. Absolutely, and at the same time that we're reducing our outflow of energy, we are trying to create a electric vehicle, which you and I both know are really uptick, so that we reduce the number of carbon footprints with our gas vehicles. So we're going to have less electricity, more vehicles that run on electricity. And if they have their way at some point in time, I'm sure they're going to try to take away our gas stoves. So it's like we're going to put greater demand on our electric grid while it's electric grid's ability to produce electricity.
Right.
That makes
And
perfect
then
sense.
sure, and combine that with the population growth, which is over 2% a year, and you're just asking for trouble. And the fact that this went through sailing through the legislature and that it's a state mandate that Santee Cooper eliminate these two coal plants by 2032 is insanity. It's insanity. So basically what they're asking them to do is you have to also have to convert these coal plants, any coal plants that are around, you have to there's a way to recapture the carbon. And that's another project that costs billions of dollars. And eventually, who sees this? Who pays for this? It's ratepayers. We the people pay for it. And guess what? Again, the companies that have come here from overseas in particular are not going to come here. And guess what? They might leave. They might leave.
Yeah.
They can just pick up and leave. So you have a company like Volkswagen, Scout, right? That
Yeah.
that is going to come here, got their $400 million check, got their $1.3 billion in incentives, and
Right.
then they're going to see their costs go up more than 2.5 times in the next 9 years. It's just insanity.
Yes. Yeah. I don't even know. I mean, I'm not even
Yeah, you
sure.
don't know
So
what to say, right? You don't even
what
know
would
what to
David,
say.
did David Walsh offer any possible way to roll this back, or what was his opinion on that?
No, I mean, they didn't even get into that. I mean, they got all over the legislature. I mean, Steve Bannon was
Right.
incredulous. He was like, what do you mean? That's a Republican legislature. You have two major players down here in Senator Scott and former Governor Haley who are running for president. And that's what's going on in that state.
Yeah.
Everybody just can't believe what goes on here. They think it's this bastion of conservatism down here. And as far as the people are concerned, it is.
Right.
But as far as the legislature is concerned, it's not.
Yeah, and that's the thing that really frustrates me, is that you're absolutely right times about when you came here, you were excited to actually vote for a Republican who would win. Oh my God. But in truth, what people don't know until they get here is that, yeah, you get to vote for the guy or the girl that has the R beside their name, but in truth, these people are not Republicans. And that's why they have bills making their way through the legislature pretty much unassailed. And the small minority, which is the Freedom Caucus, that actually tries to fight against this nonsense, they're not strong enough by numbers to be able to bat this stuff down. And that's why we don't have constitutional, folks. Once again, very slow and painful death in the Senate. And John and I have talked about the ways in which we felt an amendment to kind of make all sides a little happier could have been done, but they had no intention. They had no intentions of letting that get by. So we're looking at a state that doesn't really, because the people, as you said, are conservative, but our representatives are woefully inadequate as conservatives. And, we really do have a party that's a uniparty here in the state of South Carolina. And I can't say it enough that when you have individuals like Luke Rankin, who's just, and those are just two people that come to the top of my mind, because they were both in the Democrat Party. And then they had, at some point in time, they had an epiphany, and they left the Democratic Party and crossed over to the Republican Party. The problem is they left the party, but they brought their ideologies with them. So they're still liberals. They're still voting against the conservative values of the people that they're supposed to represent. And folks don't pay attention. And so the next time the election comes around, they just go up there and they pull the lever for the guy or the gal that's been in office and have the R beside their name, not realizing that we're basically, it's almost like we're our own executioners, and we're pulling the lever to execute ourselves slowly with these bills that are making their way through our state legislature when they should have never even been mentioned, brought forward, let alone passed into law.
Yeah, and when you combine, I mean, think about the irony of this. We got all over the state legislature for writing this $400 million check and giving $1.3 billion in incentives, taking our money and giving it to Volkswagen Scout, right? So they signed that deal and they're giving them this check and these incentives. And then they're basically Volkswagen Scout's going to have to shell out that money just to pay for the rates in the electric increase. So how are they going to invest? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if when push comes to shove, I wonder if this is all ever going to come off. Because once Volkswagen Scout sees what's going to happen to the energy prices here, they might rethink this whole deal. They might have to rethink this whole deal, because it was based on the fact that, I want to get into the numbers, 11 cents per kilowatt hour, which is really, really cheap, 4.5
Right.
times less than it was in Germany. If you're going up 2.5 to 3 times the cost, well, guess what? You might want to rethink that deal and go somewhere else. And all of this is, again, it's the government interfering in what is truly supposed to be a free market. They're picking winners and losers, and then they're tilting the game in the wrong direction. Everything that attracts people, companies, to come to this state, like energy in particular, guess what?
Yeah.
They're not going to come anymore because of these idiotic leftist policies, these Green New Deal type policies that they have no base in science. I don't even want to get into that. But
Right.
there's no basis for this. And like I said, there are only 13 countries that have signed on to this net carbon zero emissions thing. 13 out of 183.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're one of the 13, and everybody else, all our competitors and our enemies, are going to use this to stomp all over us and end it once and for all.
Now, my hope is, and you agree with that when we have our election, this 2024 election, that either we're going to get Donald Trump or Vic Ramaswamy or Ron DeSantis or not Nikki Haley or somebody else as a Republican in the White House who can repeal all of that nonsense and say, yeah, we're not doing any of that. Just take us right back out of that net zero promise and say, no, we're out, just like just like Trump did with the Iran deal. Take us out of that. That's our only saving grace. Is we've got to get a strong Republican candidate back into the White House, and then protect that individual with a strong majority in both the House and the Senate. We don't have that right now, and that's going to be important. And folks, in the same way, national level, we've also got to continue to scrutinize every member of our state legislature and be sure that we're putting true conservatives in the state house here in South Carolina. And to date, I can't say this enough. If you look at the entire delegation, all 14 members of the Horry delegation, we do not have, period. There's not one strong conservative. We have moderates. We don't have any conservatives. So I again will reiterate that I beg you, if you live in any of these folks' districts, consider running for office. We've got to primary these folks and start getting. Now, I understand fully, and I know John understands this as well. We could primary on all 14 races, most likely. But if we can pick off 4, if we can pick off 5, we can start making a difference. And absolutely, Jeanette, we've got to make a change. We have to start getting information out to the people. And that's why, look, not because I care about the views of people that watch this show, but because we focus and nobody else does it. Everybody else is focused on the national. Not that that's not important, because it is, but we've got to start letting people know what's going on in our state.
Yeah, and the media certainly doesn't do any of it. It's none of it. There's none of these stories are on local news, so a lot of people don't find out about it. And one more thing before we move on to another topic. You often hear that climate change disproportionately affects people in minority communities and people who are poverty stricken.
Yes.
You hear that all the time. It's part of social justice. It's all, hold on a minute. If our rates go up 2.5 times, who's going to get hit the hardest? Who's going to hit the hardest? Not the wealthy. It's going to be people that are on the lower end of the economic scale, because electricity and energy, that has an effect. The cost of that has an effect on every part of our lives. So what's going to happen? People won't be able to afford energy. Food prices are going to go up. Think about that for a minute. Food prices are going to go up. If they go up proportionally to the energy prices, that means that food prices are going to more than double. So who's that going to affect? Do you think? I mean, I lived in New York City for over 60 years. Do you think that anybody who lives in New York City comes out in the morning, they're struggling to put food on the table, they're struggling to pay rent, they're struggling to do just about everything? You think they go up there and go, boy, I can't wait for that carbon zero emission stuff? Believe me, they're not worried about that. They're worried about trying to find cheap food. And you're not going to find cheap food if you keep doubling and tripling the prices of energy. And this is all a coordinated effort to take down this country. I don't care what anybody says. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but nobody could be that dumb when it comes to energy. You can't be that dumb. When Donald Trump was in office, we were energy dominant, never mind energy independent. Prices were low and we were selling stuff left and right. I mean, we were selling to overseas. Everybody was buying our energy. We have more natural gas than anybody. We have the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. That's what we are.
Yeah.
And until people start to realize that, and to realize this whole net carbon zero emission is nonsense, and I could give you a million reasons why temperatures are up. Mostly, this is my favorite one, and then I'll get off.
Yeah.
My favorite one. Okay, they say these are the warmest temperatures in 100 years. Go back 100 years and see how accurate the mechanisms that they used to take temperatures were back then. Think about that for a minute. Right. I mean, we've come a long way in 100 years when it comes to technology and reading certain things. And the other thing that you have to look at too is that, and people never want to admit this, when you have the amount of construction that we've had, and you have the growth that we've had, and you've had the growth of homes that all have glass windows and all reflect heat. You think of the office buildings in cities, they all reflect heat at a higher temperature than it's hitting, right? When it hits that building, it reflects it. I'll give you a perfect example. I went out to walk the dog one morning on a cold morning, and it was about 30 degrees out. So I walk in front of my house, and all of a sudden I feel this, it was like a heater. I'm like, I'm in the middle of the street. I'm like, what is that? it was the sun reflecting off my neighbor's windows from across the street. So it's 30 degrees out, and all of a sudden, where I'm standing, it's 70 degrees.
Right.
And so that's just me in a little window across the street. That's happening everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere. It's got nothing to do with carbon emissions. So, I mean, I could
Yep.
go on and on and on about that. But the bottom line is we need to get away from this. We need to get people in the state house that understand this, and that if you want to look at this 100 years down the line, okay, great. You know, it's you know, there's a reason that the Dutch got away from windmills, you know.
Yeah, yeah. There's a reason why they're not. Why?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, if
exactly.
it was working, they would have stayed with it.
They're not still
Simple
using
as that.
windmills, and they've kind of gotten off of the wooden shoes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny you should say that, because let's talk about the electric vehicles again. I saw an interesting story from Elon Musk, and he was talking about that the cost of a Tesla was prohibitive to people that, you know, with a budget, the typical budget, people couldn't afford a Tesla. So the interest rates, and I can speak personally to this because yesterday I traded in my Mustang for a new Ford Bronco, and I was absolutely floored at the interest rates. Now, folks, I'm going to give you more information than I probably should, but my credit score is 815. You
Right.
can't
Yeah.
get
I'm
a
up
whole
there.
lot higher than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Pretty good 815 rate was. Now, when we first bought my Mustang, I got an interest rate of like 0.09.
Right.
Was my interest rate. So, you know, less than 1. So take a guess at what the interest rate was yesterday when I went
Well,
to purchase
for
this.
how long? How many months?
Oh, it's for 70 months.
70 months. Yeah. What is it?
72 months. Yeah.
6%. Yeah. 7.9.
7%. I almost died right there in my chair. I said,
It's
"Are you
insanity.
kidding me?" So I got my phone out and I'm looking, and that is what the interest rate. And that's how I came across the article from Elon Musk, because he said interest rates have quadrupled the last 4 months. And as a result of that, the people who couldn't afford his car previously definitely can't afford his car now. So he's actually started producing Teslas that are in the $39,000 range, which is considerably cheaper than they were previously. And recognize that you cannot sell a vehicle that nobody can afford. So he went to his committee, his board, whatever, and said, "Look, you know, we're not going to sell the ridiculously $100,000 Teslas anymore. We're going to try to mass produce these $40,000 and under Teslas so we can get more people." Now, on the one hand, I think, wow, that's great of him. I'm glad that he's paying attention to what's going on. But on the other hand, it plays in exactly what you're saying, this net carbon idea. And even Elon has said there is no way that we're going to get to an all electric vehicle, or I hate even say all battery operated vehicle status. Will not maintain that. And we've seen that in California with their rolling blackouts and brownouts. You know, I thought it was hilarious that Gavin Newsom, you know, came out and basically mandated something very similar to what we see here in South Carolina. I think it was 2032. All the vehicles have to be, you know, electric vehicles or battery operated vehicles, whatever you choose to call them. And then the very next day he said, "Oh, by the way, if you have an EV, you can't charge it."
Right.
Because our grid's overwhelmed.
Well, you know, I've talked about this for
Can't
many
make it up.
different subjects, but the two words that should make everybody shake are government mandates. Period. Government mandates. You never want to hear that phrase in a representative democracy. The government shouldn't be mandating anything. All right, we're supposed to be free, we the people, etc. As for Musk, I mean, I guess the buried lead is that he's going to sell his Teslas cheap. He's going to undersell Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, and he's going to put them out of business, is what he's going to do. And I guess the buried lead under that is that most of his operations are out of Shanghai. Then nobody wants to talk about that. I mean, Musk, for all of his good points, he's still got major CCP investment in his company.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, there have been some things that Elon has done that I obviously applaud. The taking of was good. Really thrilled with the way that he's managed it, because I still hear people getting kicked off for
all the
making
time
comments. But what I will say is that there are plenty. He's not a conservative, folks. Elon Musk is not a conservative. So there's a lot of things that he does and says that I absolutely. You know, the Robert Kennedy thing, there are things that he says that I'm like, yep, I agree with that. But there's also things he says I'm like, whoa, Nelly, no, don't. That's why he's a Democrat, and I don't I don't find myself relating to Democrats on a continuous basis in a positive way. Usually it's weird. And that again is part of the problem here in South Carolina. And I think it is why oh my gosh, the National Rifle Association and some other groups have really been hot and heavy attacking Greg Hembry and Luke Rankin. I mean, I for a while all I saw were attack ads, basically illustrating that he's stabbing them in the back. And then I saw, I guess was maybe a day or two ago, I saw they finally went after Luke Rankin as well. Um, so it was interesting to see that, and folks, both of those are Republicans. So you would think that if we're going to have anybody that's be some. So I don't know
Yeah, and
exactly how we fix that. Go ahead.
I mean, you have a super majority,
Yeah.
and the House passed this bill. So that is the voice of we the people. The House
Yeah.
is really more than
Yeah.
the Senate. So
Correct.
if the House passed it, all right, if you want to, look at a few things, look at a few amendments, I get that. I totally
Yep.
get that because that's the part of the process. But what you have to remember, if you're a representative, especially at the Senate level, is that this is what we the people want.
Right.
That's what we want. That's why we put people in office to approve this. And if you're going to get in the way again, well, guess what? You do so at your own peril. And we
Yep.
need to step up. We need to get people, we need to fund people that'll go out and once and for all take these people out of office because they don't represent the will of we the people.
Yeah. And I know I'm going to kind of beat an old dog here, but as I mentioned last week, I made my way sit in on a subcommittee hearing. And John and I discussed this last time, that when you had the House flip, the U.S. House flip this last time, part of the reason why Democrats were losing their minds is because they were all going to lose their chair positions. You do not get to chair committees when your party is not the one in the majority. When finding out that a Democrat, Ms. Bernstein, was the chair of this subcommittee, I thought, what's going on here? It's not enough to say, I mean, even in the House, the U.S. House, we have a very slim majority, just a couple of seats. But here in South Carolina, we have a super majority. So it is mind boggling that we do not have locked up by a Republican. But then again, as I've noted, there's not a whole lot of difference in how they vote, because really we have a lot of people running as Republicans who are anything but Republican. So I found that appalling. And we continue to see coming out of our state legislature weak a conservative position. It's not even conservative. I mean, what would you say, John? Moderate. I mean, we're purple.
Yeah.
So it should be no surprise that we're seeing this woke nonsense, such as, this carbon zero, net zero nonsense. And then let's talk about her famous statement that she made on the news there. Hey, you know what? If you don't want Disney in Florida, we'll take Disney here in South Carolina. No, we won't.
No,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
but I'll pass.
Yeah. And who did you ask exactly? Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
We love Disney. Yeah. No, no.
I haven't met anybody here. Now I've got some friends and some church member friends, and I got to tell you, they got little kids under the age of 5 and under, and they're big Disney people. And they go to Disney and they participate. And I've kind of said to them, why are you propping this organization up? It's not there to help your kids anymore. It's there to harm your kids. And well, we just like it. It's fun, and our kids, they get to ride the rides and all of that. And I, so that bothers me, because conservatives have got to stop riding the fence. That's why I saw a lot of people saying that the people were boycotting Bud Light. Well, Bud Light's banking on that not lasting very long. And I haven't been following it recently. To be honest with you, this
So
past week I've been
it's still
busy.
going.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, this person right here, I was a Michelob Ultra fan. I will never buy another Michelob Ultra, period. I will never purchase another Bud Light, nothing. And Coca-Cola came out, what was it, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and made their statement that, they were teaching people that we were too white, we needed to be less white. I made the switch, and I won't go back. I'm a Pepsi drinker now. Now, I'm sure if we did some digging, we'd find out Pepsi has got some woke nonsense as having to drink tea that I make myself, But when I decide to boycott a company, I don't do it lightly. I used to wear exclusively Nike. I was a Nike shoe wearer. That's all I wore. I don't wear Nike anymore. And then I went to New Balance, and I wear New. Now I'm with Skechers. Like I can't make my own shoes, so at some point in time,
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
I'll
it's
have to go
hard
to
to
some
find
company that makes
anything.
them
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard
So
to find anything.
we can have some impact on those things, but where we can have the greatest impact, and I'm going to beat this drum over and over again, is we need you folks. We need you folks out there. You live to watch a 60-minute segment about what's going on in the state of South Carolina. We need you to step up and say, well, I don't really want to run. I don't really want to be in Columbia because it's nothing but a microcosm of swamp. But my country needs me. My state needs me. My family needs me. My friend, we do. We need genuine conservatives. We need Christians who are going to go up there and vote the way the people in the state want them to vote. They're going to represent the conservative ideology that is across the state prevalent. And that's what we need. And it may mean maybe 4 years. We're not asking you to go forever. But if somebody would step up and serve maybe 2 terms, John, 4 years up there, and then kind of got another friend that says, all right, you did your 4 years. I'll step up and take 4 years of that now. And I'll kind of carry your mantle, if you will. That's what we need. I'm not asking anybody to go to Columbia and make it a life commitment because, frankly, that's not what our founders intended. They intended you to go and serve for a short period of time and then return to the communities where you've passed these laws and live under the laws that you've passed. So we've got to get people motivated to run for office. And I both have stepped up and ran. So we're willing to get into the fray. And it's no fun.
No,
Uh,
no.
John, I mean, well, how was it? Was it easy? Was it
Well,
easy for you to do that?
my experience was so different because I ran during the lockdowns. Now
Yeah,
down here, lockdowns were okay. You ran during the lockdown. Up in New York when I ran, everything was locked down.
yeah,
So we really couldn't. It was tough to get our message out there. And the other part of it
right.
was, and this happens all over the place, was when I ran for Congress. For those of you that don't know, I ran in New York 14 against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2020. My campaign was completely blacked out by the local media, not unlike what happens here.
Yeah,
So up there are 6 regular local channels, as we used to call them, the over-the-air channels, local channels, which is CBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, a Fox hybrid, and an independent. There's 6. None of them
yeah,
covered my race. None of them. Now, I was running against the most popular
right.
meaning that people know who she is,
Yeah.
person
The
in the
most
House
well
of
known.
Representatives, other than Speaker Pelosi at the time.
Yeah,
And they never covered my race. So when you combine that with the fact that we were pretty much shut out from having events until the very end, the
yeah,
lockdowns we couldn't go door to door, which is the best way to win. Everybody knows that. We couldn't go door to door. That was impossible. When you went out in the street to try to meet people, they'd run away. They'd back off. They couldn't. Most of the people wouldn't come anywhere near you. We couldn't stand outside of church. Church was closed. We couldn't stand outside of school. School was closed. We couldn't stand
yeah,
outside of the subway because nobody was going to work. So
right.
mostly we went to the supermarket, and then most of the supermarket owners would kick us off their property because they didn't want anybody
Right.
on their property.
Yeah, Republican, get
Right.
out of
So
here.
you're right. Get out. So it was so different. But still, even with all of that, there's still all of that scrutiny. There's still combing through every part of your life. They're going to find something. As a friend of mine used to call it, and it's funny. His grandparents were from South Carolina, and that's where he got it. I'll
Right.
clean it up because people look for the fly poop in the pepper. You know,
Uh-huh.
and that's what they do when you run for. If they're going to find anything, and guess what? If they don't find anything, they'll make stuff up.
They'll make it up. Yeah,
Right? They'll
yeah,
make
they're
stuff up.
making stuff
So
up.
you
They're very
better be
creative.
you better have a pretty thick skin if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to talk about once you're done with it. People say, "What was that like?" I could really write a book about it, but people have to step up. My thing is, if not now, when?
Exactly.
People have to step up. If we can get that Freedom Caucus up to about 30, 35 people, I think you could do a real change of direction when it comes to what goes on in Colombia. And what we need really, we need small government minded people. That's what we
Right.
need. You know, that conservative term, it probably covers way too many things. You know, if you're
Yeah.
socially conservative, but if you love the government, well, guess what?
Okay. If you're
You're
not
not really
fiscally
a
conservative,
you're
yeah.
right. You might be conservative on social issues, but you believe in big government. You know,
Yeah.
I believe the government's usually the problem. You know, just like I said, set the table and get out of the way, and let we the people have at it. And then if somebody crosses the line, well, then you rein them back in. That's the government's job. The government's job is to regulate, not to run. The government's job is to regulate. I know I sound like a school teacher. The government's job is to regulate, and regulate by definition means to keep regular. Just make sure the rules are fair and let the people have at it. And the more the government gets involved, the more the government interferes, 99 times out of 100, the worse it'll be. Because
Yeah.
then they're too involved. And the other part of it is then they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, like shut the
Right.
border,
Yeah.
right? Those easy
Yeah.
things.
Yep. And I know you saw the story of that had crossed the border, I think 4 times and been deported, and then he shot and
Right, in
killed, went into
Texas,
the
right?
home and killed 5 people in Texas. And those are just examples of how the failure to secure our border is really the failure to secure us as Americans from attacks from any number of sources. It doesn't just goes to your home, and we could be and allowing terrorists to come in who are plotting the next 9/11. Um, and that's important because they're not just staying there in Texas. I mean, obviously they're coming into states like South Carolina. So we've got to be cognizant of what's going on. And it really, folks, it's so important that we know who and know what for and what they don't stand for. Ask those uncomfortable questions. And I can't say this enough. There are a lot of people who are not fans of Lindsey Graham. I mean, he continues to get elected primarily because nobody has the money to run against him. Let's just be honest; they lack the funding to run and beat him. But Lindsey Graham would have never gotten into office had somebody not voted him into the state house here in South Carolina had he not been elected. And I can't help but say that I don't know if I did a study, I bet I'd find that somewhere between 70 to 75% of our list of attorneys. And again, we've talked about the fact that they're the only ones that can afford to do it because you don't get paid very much, and you're spending, 3 to 4 days a week in Columbia, and so financially, unless you're a retiree or maybe you're a realtor, a school teacher can't do it. Now, that's not you're a school teacher or
Yeah,
an
or a
administrator,
business owner.
right, or a business
Private
owner.
business owner is very hard to do. You have to have
Yeah, it's
somebody
very difficult.
mind your
Gotta have
business, right?
somebody. Yep, somebody's got to cover the business for you. So I know that we have a significant number of retirees that have moved here to Ori. And so I would say if you're one of those folks, let's see if it's by putting in someone who's not a lawyer. Because I think the nature of most lawyers tends to be that they just tend to be liberal. They really do. And listening to the lawyers who stood up and spoke in favor of some of these bad bills that were brought forward by the legislature. Representative Gil Gatch had a terrible bill that he introduced, and it made it out of the subcommittee to the full committee. And I hope it gets knocked down in the full committee. But it was a bill that was going to basically professionalize the guardian ad litem system. So the people that are allowed to be guardian ad litems would be attorneys. Now, there's a couple things wrong with that, and John Gallman laid out a lot of those things. But one of them, of course, is if you're a low income person and you're fighting for your child, and now they're going to add an additional attorney fee on top of that. That because you've already got to pay your attorney, so now you got to pay another attorney who's going to oversee or defend your daughter, son, or whatever, rather than having a layperson. Now, when we say layperson, that doesn't mean that it's you or I. It basically, when they've changed this, pediatricians. I mean, who more understands what's going on with a child than a pediatrician? Well, now they can't do it. A social worker, a psychologist, a sociologist, anybody who has any kind of degree or license,
Yeah.
you're
School
not a
teacher,
lawyer.
school teacher.
Yeah, a school teacher, you, a counselor, a guidance counselor, you, a pastor. I mean, you cannot represent these children anymore because you're not an attorney. I find that absolutely appalling that you have an attorney who introduces a bill that helps him, puts money in his pocket, and then the people that stood up, can anybody guess? We're all attorneys. And then the chairperson of this committee was, anyone want to guess? An attorney. In fact, I think just about everybody sitting in that subcommittee, because even here you had Case Britton, who was one of our representatives. What does Case Britton do? Oh, wait, he's an attorney. You had Val Guest. What does Val Guest do? Val Guest is an attorney. We have too many damn attorneys as our representatives. They don't represent us, they represent themselves and what's in their personal best interest. And that's why that bill got passed from the subcommittee to the full committee. And again, I mean, when you're taking away, you're telling a pediatrician, well, you don't really know enough about kids.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to defend the child. And the one attorney who stood up to defend this bill said, well, you know, I had this guardian ad litem, and she was taking her religious beliefs and imposing them on the family, my client. And she said that my client's beliefs were strange. And I thought, well, you do the same thing. You can turn that off. You have belief systems too, and don't think for a minute that you're not biased towards people that don't have your same views, because you are. But you cannot simply because you are an attorney get to just say, well, I'm sorry, if you're not an attorney, you don't, and impose that cost on an already broken system. Our DSS system is broken, John. It is horrendous. The cash for kids is disgusting.
And the one thing that you continue to notice and to realize is that everybody, really on both sides, who continue to say, well, you know, we need to help the people who are less fortunate than us. We need to help people who are in the lower end of the economic scale. And everything that they do creates problems for that exact group. I mean, just pick a topic. You just talked about childcare and that system, which is a disaster. We talked about energy. We talked about the border. Who's coming in here? They're coming in here and they're going to take jobs from people who are already here that are really
Yep.
struggling, and they're going to work for even less
Yep.
than the people that are already here on the lower end of the economic scale. They're going to work for less than those people work for.
Right.
So who you continually hurt the people that you claim to champion. And that goes
Yes.
especially on the left, especially on the left. Just school choice, everything that's aimed to help people that they say they represent, they just completely and continually go against all of it, while they run the flag up the pole and say, "Hey, look at us, we're the champion of the lower class." No,
Good
you're not.
people. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
making the class even bigger than it was. And everything that you do is going to make the lower class, bigger than it was. Everybody's going to be on the lower end of the economic scale. And what you're going to end up is with an oligarchy. You almost have that
Yeah.
now. You're
Yeah. We're pretty much there.
completely eliminating the middle class, completely. And to be honest, the working class drops lower and lower and lower. You know, real wages in the United States have dropped 25 consecutive months. Real
Yep.
wages. Can you imagine? 25, and then, oh yeah, job, oh, unemployment. Well, first of all, a lot of people that don't show up on the unemployment rolls just completely dropped out of the system. They're not doing anything. But the idea that, you know, real wages continue to go down tells you all you need to know, because guess what? That just creates poverty. Real wages are going down, and inflation is taking everything in the other
Yep.
direction. So
Correct.
your dollar buys less and less and less. And now when we go back to the beginning of the show, let's raise the energy rates 2.5 times and see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, it's already gone up. I know. I'm a weird person, and I have on my phone that it tells me every day what my energy use was yesterday and what the cost was. It's already doubled from what it was last year. At the same time,
Yeah, and
and
they
I
just
can
approved the
verify
rate.
that. Yeah,
They just approved the rate
another rate
increase.
hike.
The
Yeah,
the Energy Commission. I think it was going to cost. They said about an average of $5.60 per household. So they make it
yeah,
sound like it's not a lot.
yeah.
But
Not a big
you know
deal.
what? It's not going in the other direction. And quite honestly, with all the
Already
energy we have in
super
this country, it should
thin.
go.
That's a big
Right.
deal.
With all the energy that
Well,
we have in this country, we should be paying not a lot for energy. We really shouldn't.
to jump back on the guardian ad litem thing where they're forcing them now to be attorneys, I would say this. Okay, fine. If you want to push that through and you want to say that only an attorney can properly represent battle, fine. Then you need to do it pro bono. That should be a requirement. They need to add an amendment that the attorney has to be just like you have a public prosecutor, a public defender, rather, and the public defender does it for free or whatever. The tax dollars pay for it. Well, it needs to be either A, pro bono, or B, you get paid whatever the previous layman guardian ad litem paid. If they got paid $10 an hour, that's what you get, regardless of whether you're an attorney or not. And let's just see how well they want to do it then. But that's what I say. So we need to make sure that's not cost prohibitive
Yeah, follow
to low income folks. Yep, follow the money.
follow
And
the
if they're
money.
not willing to do it for that reason, then go back and let it be a lay person, because I think that's nonsense. They don't have the best interest of the kids in mind, and that's very evident when they wouldn't even pass through a bill that simply says that as long as a parent is willing, able, and fit, they should have equal access to their child, equal opportunity. Approximately equal is actually what it says. And I can't understand case. If 6 months earlier the couple, with the child were able to, the wife could leave and go to work and leave the child with the husband, and there's no issues, and vice versa, and then through whatever personal problems they have, they decide to divorce, and now the husband can't. Wife is using the child as a tool or a weapon, or vice versa. The husband is using the child as a weapon to hurt the spouse. Either way, it's not right, and we've got to do a better job of making sure that parents, because in the end of the day, you're hurting the kids. It's not so much about the mom or the dad. There are, I think, 60 different metadata cases that have been done that prove inexplicably or without refute that a child is better when they have access to both their parents. They have a better upbringing. I mean, there's all kind of statistics to show that kids that later on get into trouble, it's because they didn't have a father figure or whatever they had, whatever the case may be. So if we know that to be the case, then we need to do a better job of making sure that those kids have an opportunity
Mm.
to be with both parents.
And again,
Um,
it's not a Republican Democrat issue. It's a common sense issue. If you went
right.
to any community in this state and you put together a group of parents and you said, what's ideal here in these cases?
Yep.
If they hit all the three that you talked about, right? That they're fit parents
Yep.
and they both want to
They're
share
willing
this,
and they're able. Yep.
willing, yeah, fit willing, and there isn't a person that you would ask that wouldn't agree to the fact that, yeah, kids should spend time with both their parents, and it should be a lot of time with both their parents.
Yep.
But there's nobody that would ever say, "Oh, that's a bad idea."
Yeah.
Once you establish that these are two good parents who want to share custody, 50-50, that's it. Case
Yep.
closed. So instead,
Exactly.
they're going to try. Now, why would anybody do that? Why would anybody go against that? There's got to be a reason, and I hate to say it, it's probably
It's
follow
the
the money.
money. Well,
Follow
it
the
is the
money.
money because listen,
Yeah,
where attorneys make the largest amount of money in divorces is custody battles.
no
That's
doubt.
where the largest amount of their money is made. We had a gentleman that came up there, and he said, honestly, this is infuriating to hear him talk about it. He said he was to the point of being homeless. He had spent every dime. Once the attorneys realized, wow, this guy has no money left, suddenly they were able to start making deals. But prior to that, oh, they won't agree with us. We just gotta have to keep fighting them. So as long as he had money that they could take from him, they continued to push this and push this and push this and fight and fight and fight. And then as soon as they realized that this guy's about to be homeless, he has a case. Um, and that is wrong. That is wrong on so many levels. And it just goes to show that these folks, again, do not have the best interests of the child or the people of South Carolina. They have the best interests of themselves. And that's why you're seeing things like the fact that we could not get a protection, add one. And how did it get struck down? Well, it got struck down in our state Supreme Court. And how did that happen? Because our judicial committee from our state legislators, which is, of course, the Senate, they elected and put into place a liberal justice. And in doing so, they made certain that going to be able to stand, and it was struck down. So again, it goes back to, once more, the attorneys. We keep seeing a very repetitive pattern. So not that we don't need attorneys, not that there aren't good attorneys, because there are. I don't want to say that every attorney out there is bad. That's not the case. But we certainly diverse representation in our state house and in our state senate, because right now it is pretty much dominated by attorneys, and they seem to be less than supportive of anything we the people want. It's more about what they think they can do. um, you already had, Todd, an attorney and a Democrat, stand up and say, "Hey, listen, Mr. Adam Morgan, what's the big idea? You're listening to your voters instead of listening to the Chamber of Commerce and these other lobbyists out here." I can't believe he said the quiet part out loud, but he did.
Yeah, he certainly
Um,
did.
and then, of
And it,
course, he's the gentleman who skipped all the steps to get a gentleman who was convicted of murder out of jail 16 years early. Now, I understand. I think he's been picked back up. I might be wrong
yeah.
about that, but I thought I saw a press conference in which he had been arrested again and placed back in prison. And rightfully so. You don't get
But
to
I
skip
think
jail.
the point we really need to impart on the general public, and I know a lot of people don't pay as much attention as they should, is that this is a conservative state. The people are.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think
Yep.
there's any doubt about that. Yet we still have a 20-week abortion.
Yep.
We don't have a constitutional carry. We have these Green New
Hmm.
Deal legislation, or this Green New Deal legislation going through. We
Yep.
have a legislature that gives $400 million and a $1.3 billion incentive for one of the biggest woke
Wokest
corporations in the
companies. Yeah.
world to come
Yep.
here and create 4,000 jobs, probably 3,000 of whom will be filled by German nationals who will come here
Right.
and work for them. I mean, that's not what conservative states do legislatively. And
Right.
yet it's issue after issue after issue that this quote unquote conservative state, the legislature is on the wrong side of the ledger every time.
Yep. And again, as people just don't see, they don't pay attention to what's going on, and then they seem surprised when the cost of living continues to go up, and so they just assume, well, it can't be my state legislators; it's got to be the federal
No,
legislators causing all these problems, folks. It starts local. All this is local. These folks that are in the federal legislature in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate, they started out more than likely at some local position or some state position. They got elected into that, and then they made their way up. Now there are exceptions to that rule, but there aren't many. There aren't many.
no,
There aren't a lot of Donald Trump's business owner
no,
who then made
no.
his way into the
Right.
presidency. He's
And
kind of
we
the only
let
one that I know of.
and I left out the constitutional carry. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
another one. It's the
yeah,
look, the people want it, and you have to put it through. That's what you have to do. I mean, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You don't have three people hold up what the state wants, what we the people
right,
want. Now we've talked about that. Are there some things you can do to fine tune it? Sure there are. Sure there are. I know
yep,
there are people that are uncomfortable with just the average person getting a gun and having no safety classes, or we talked about this before. You could
yep.
very easily set up an online class that is of
Mhm.
no cost to the person that
No
has to
cost.
take it.
Yep.
It's not going to hold anybody up. It's what we've all taken those online tests where you have to be
Yes.
there every 2 minutes to hit the queue. Otherwise, guess what? It doesn't work. People say, well,
Yep.
there's people that don't have broadband. They don't have access to that. Well, that's something that should have been worked on by the legislature a long time ago.
Right.
Get your
Go to the public
priorities in
library. They have it.
get your priorities in the right place. The fact that there are people that don't have access still to this day is mind-boggling to me. That's something that they should have worked out with the providers a long time ago, but they never did. But there's no reason you shouldn't take that. And on top of that, like I've said before, when it comes to constitutional carry, in addition to that, once that passes, you should be able to get a concealed carry permit by taking a class, and then you should be able to carry that firearm anywhere you want, because that's the idea of a concealed carry. We have to stop this whole mindset of these gun-free zones. Those are
Yeah.
soft targets. That was another thing I
Mhm.
could not believe when I came down here, is
Yeah.
that when you have a full carry in New York, now we're talking New York State here, right? It's
Yeah.
one of the most liberal states in the country. When you have a full carry, you can carry your gun anywhere, into a school, into a mall, into a ball game. I mean, I carried my gun for a long time up there. It was concealed. The only place I ever had to turn my gun over, as I mentioned last week, was when I went to court. If I had to go to jury
Right.
duty or something, I had to voucher my gun when I got there, and the court officers would take it. They take it for safekeeping, and I get it on the way out because the court isn't exactly in the nicest neighborhood. So you'd believe me,
Right.
you'd want to have a gun down there.
Yeah.
But that's
Right.
something that had to be pursued after they get the constitutional carry through. If you want to be a little bit more, if you want to have a concealed carry, you want to go into these places, and we need people who are experienced, and I mean experienced firearms people. We need those
Yes.
people in a position where they have a concealed carry in these quote unquote what are called gun-free zones. Those need to be eliminated. They need to
Yeah.
be eliminated. Movie theaters, shopping malls, church, You carry your gun in church? Yes, I carried my gun in church. I did for a long time. And I'll tell you why. When I was a police officer in New York City, when you were off duty, when I was a police officer, they changed it since. You legally had to carry your firearm all the time. You weren't allowed out of your house without it. Period. You couldn't. It caused quite a problem when you went to the beach, but you had to carry your firearm all the time because guess what? You were on duty 24 hours a day, and there's no reason that well-trained people, former law enforcement, former military police, people who are willing to make that sacrifice, take those classes, and keep up to date on the newest technology and everything, and all the new strategies and whatever that they have for bad situations. Look, we need those people in public, and guess what? The public doesn't need to know who they are.
Right. It's interesting because Jeanette Spurlock, the vice chairman for the Horry County Republican Party, had been looking for a couple of weeks to try to find a place that we could hold a gun safety training, a class where a gentleman's going to come out and give us gun safety training. And she said that every place she looked at, every venue she called up, said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't allow weapons on the property." So
Right.
it's like we can't even do a gun safety class.
There are.
So it's
I have to
mind-boggling.
look into. There's someone that comes on. He comes on Steve Bannon show all the time. I have to look a little bit more into it. And he has a technology. It's got to do with your phone and everything. It's all technology,
Yeah,
and you can actually practice in your house without live ammunition.
I have it. Yeah, I have
Do
it.
you?
So it's a
Yeah.
laser target. Yeah, it's a little
Right.
bullet that actually has a laser on it, and you use your
Right.
phone, and it
So
tells you.
that's a
Yeah,
that's a great way to do it and to stay proficient because a
yeah,
lot of people can't get to the range a lot, and that's a good alternative. But yeah, there should be more gun safety classes. There's no doubt about that, and I know
right.
that that new armory opened up on 17, and I think that as we move along, I think more and more gun shops will open, and I think that's a good thing. You want people proficient.
Yeah, I will try to bring the round and everything to the training. I believe Jeanette has got it set it up. Um, Jeanette, when is it that you have it set up for the date and the things at the Palmetto Armory? If I'm not mistaken, she got them to commit to letting us use that location to do the training. Um, eh, was it May 30th, Jeanette? Is that when you got it set up to do it? Oh, June 3rd. Okay, so it's June 3rd. And so we're going to have the training there, and it should be a really good event, and hopefully as many people can come out as possible, so that we can get from 11 to 3 on June 3rd. We get a lot of people to come out and become proficient in understanding how to safely use, store, carry, whatever, a weapon. I think that is important. We definitely have got a lot of work to do. Oh, it's Myrtle Beach Sports Complex. I think it's not the Palmetto Armory. It's at the North Myrtle Beach Sports Complex, June 3rd from 11 to 3. So if you're interested, come on out. There'll probably be a small charge, I'm guessing, because we have to cover the cost of renting the facility, but it may not be a very large charge. But we've got to do a better job of letting people know what's going on. That means talking to your friends, talking to the folks you go to church with, and sharing with them, listen, we do not have people that represent our values in our state legislature, whether it be in the House or whether it be in the Senate here in Horry. So we've got to do a better job. Oh, great, great. So it's going to be $15 for the class from 11 to 3. Plus, that's going to include lunch. So that's a pretty good deal because, heck, you go to McDonald's, it's
Can
$15 for
get lunch
lunch.
for $15.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So that's a great deal to get some good information and to feel comfortable with your weapon. Um, but again, I'm going to keep beating this dead horse. Please, please, please. If you are a person who is in a position, especially, or you have an occupation, maybe a realtor, that allows you to have some freedom in terms of being able to commit some time uh, from, I think it's from January to basically the end of May, maybe the 1st of June. That's when you're up there in Columbia, and then you don't come back until the following January. If you can commit 3 or 4 days a week to representing the people and helping right this ship, because right now this ship is listing badly to the left, and we need to right it. We need you. We desperately need you. And if you have an interest, if you are willing, able, and fit, please reach out to us, and I will put you in contact with some individuals that can help you understand what it is to be, how to run, how to launch your campaign, and how to win. Because we've got to take back this state before we can take back the country. John, I'll let you have the final closing words before we wrap up for today.
And of course, the end game and part of this, we have to get rid of open primaries. That
Yes.
will make it far more likely that we could turn this legislature around, because we continually run into the fact that Democrats know if they vote in the Republican primary for the squishy Republican, then we conservative Republicans on election day have to go to the poll, hold our nose, and vote for these squishy Republicans over whatever Democrat they put on the ballot, and knowing full well that there isn't a damn bit of difference between the two of them.
Yes, exactly. And what I'll say is, once again, if you are a member and you've been elected to the state delegation to go to the state, please consider, I beg of you, vote for Zoe Warren. Do not vote for Drew McKissick. It's time to fire him. I think he has a huge accountability to what's happened in our state in terms of it being as conservative, excuse me, as liberal as it is, rather than as conservative as it should be. Folks, yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Godspeed, God bless, and we will see you next time. Jeanette, thanks for joining us, sister.